I mean, maybe for those who don't know, what does a trade association do? And then, like, what is maybe the state of cannabis in Jersey for those who aren't aware, especially considering, the Bluntness is a pretty international facing platform.
Well, that's so interesting when you talk about the Bluntness and actually speaking with someone from Benzinga, amazing work that you all do. And the fact, again, just flattering that New Jersey is being recognized as part of this global movement. And I think you make an excellent point there. It's part of this global movement. And so the things that we do, I won't say that we're under a microscope, but it's the notion that whatever we do, people do notice it, right? And so you try to get things right. But so on that, some of the things that I think we're doing right, I think New Jersey did it right by, number one, taking its time. I know that's kind of this.
It's a little bit of an unpopular opinion, but it's an eternal debate, right? Do we want imperfect laws now, or do we want a more sophisticated law a couple of years from now? And I mean, it's a tough call, right? There's no right answer. For me personally, if you ask me, I prefer an imperfect law now that we build on, right? Uruguay was the first country in the world to legalize adult use cannabis. And they had a law that was pretty incomplete, that just, focused on people not going to jail, not going to prison for cannabis. But, as time went by, they came out with other regulations to better regulate businesses, different opportunities, processing, manufacturing, right? They didn't have all that at first, right? And we see something similar in many U.S. states, right? Where people in California, for instance, or Colorado complain about the laws and the problems that the laws have. We're doing this for the first time. We don't know, right? New Jersey took a different route in that sense, right? They went for a more, elaborate law, but it took a little bit longer.
Right. It's interesting that you point that out. There was this kind of rhetorical statement or rhetorical question that we dealt with over the last 2 years, and that was, do you want it fast or do you want it done right? And so we found ourselves in the Cannabis Association struggling with the notion of, look, do you stand with the regulatory commission, who's got this awesome task, this overwhelming task of creating the industry, and a legislature that is saying, well, we passed the law a year ago, right? Get it done. So it really has its challenges.
Talking a little bit about challenges, what are some of the challenges that cannabis businesses face as a state or country transitions from a purely medical program to an adult use program, right? Because we've heard a lot about implementing the programs at first for medical cannabis, et cetera, but the transition toward adult use is not as well documented. Also, we've had a lot less cases to look at, right? So what are you seeing?
I like the fact that our regulatory commission had this, they had it, again, looking at the task, but then going beyond task, they made a commitment. And they made a commitment to the medical community first and foremost, that, hey, we're going to recreational or adult use, adult choice, but we're not going to leave you behind. And I thought that was very important. And so that was part of do you want it done fast or do you want it done right? It took time for the commission to actually go to the current license holders, the medical license holders, and make them demonstrate that they were going to take care of the medical community as well as the adult use community. So that has been a challenge, making sure that people maintain that commitment. When we talk about challenges, and I definitely would love to hear some of your experiences and who you've talked to, but the notion of creating a market and a licensing process, right? $1 is too much for some people to get involved in the game. But you know, as the Chamber of Commerce, one of the areas that keeps me up at night is the notion that there are people that have little business acumen who want to get into this space. They've used cannabis as teenagers, used it as adults, but use of cannabis doesn't make you a cannabis business person. Right? Look, I like to drink, but I know I shouldn't own a bar. and so when I look at that, and so it's part of our responsibility to help create avenues for people to get business acumen. So I'm curious, does anybody else out there, maybe not using the same words as we hope that you have business acumen, but other areas where people have said, you know, just because you like weed doesn't mean you should be in the weed business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, right, being in the weed business not necessarily implies or means cultivating or selling cannabis, right? That is another thing that many of us often lose sight of, right? We think, okay, I love cannabis, I got to grow it. Maybe you don't know how to grow it, right? Are you experienced in agriculture? Because this is agriculture at a big scale, right? So there's many other ways, right? You don't necessarily need to have a lot of business acumen, but you do need to know what you're going to be doing, right? So if you're an accountant, maybe you can do that. If you're a lawyer, maybe you can do that. I'm a journalist, right? I got into cannabis through journalism, right? It's not limited to just growing the cannabis itself, right? One of the things I'm curious about, though, you were mentioning, how in the transition from medical to adult use, you need certain provisions to take care of patients, right? What are some of those things, right, that you see that were necessary, right? Because one would think, okay, you open the market to adult use, and suddenly, like, every adult can access cannabis. Period. There's not a lot more to it, but there certainly is, right, in terms of price, accessibility, taxation. Right, but what are you seeing, right, in Jersey, at least?
Right. So when we talk about things that we've done right, and look, I'll digress. I love New Jersey, so I'm going to talk a lot about what we did right. but we look at access. I think access is huge, and so challenge. We only had 12 medical license holders to begin with. So starting with this very narrow platform to transfer and begin the industry, that certainly came with its challenges, right? 12 license holders to begin with, and then each one having to apply again to switch over from medical only to adult use or recreational. And so narrow platform, and then making sure that the infrastructure was there. And I thought, again, that the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, or CRC, did a really good job when they said, look, you got to have parking spaces. You have to have access, not just in terms of product, but actual lines. How do you get in and out of a facility, and do it in a way that you don't that you accommodate people with physical needs or physical challenges, and that you accommodate the adult use or recreational buyer. So the infrastructure, parking, sidewalks, things like having enough kiosks in your dispensary. At one time, you may have had 300 customers a day. Now you're at 600 or 1,000. So making sure that those accommodations were there. And again, I thought it was well done. One of the questions, though, which I found interesting, and I don't know where the number came from, I'll be honest, but when you looked at supply and making sure that there's adequate supply, 100,000 pounds of surplus. Don't know where that number came from. Maybe you can shed some light, but maybe it's arbitrary. But saying that, to me, huge number, and making sure that it existed.
I mean, there's there's always a lot of intricacies to regulated markets, right? People think that getting into growing cannabis is, there's a very common phrase, right? Like, it's weed, it sells itself. And it kind of doesn't, right? There's a lot more to it in terms of regulations, in terms of requirements, in terms of what you can and can't do, right? There's a very, emblematic case to me, and it's the case of Colombia, the South American country, right? Since it went legal for medical in 2017, approximately $800 million of foreign capital were invested into the Colombian cannabis industry with the hopes that it would explode. They were betting not only on the internal market, but mostly on exports, right? But regulations didn't allow for it just yet. Only a few months ago they allowed for the export of dried flower. Before that, it was only certain finished products and some seeds. So, all these issues ended up resulting in people not being able to sell this cannabis, right? And that is central when someone is thinking of setting up a business, raising capital, doing financial projections, right? Will I be able to sell the cannabis that I produce, right? And that is clearly evidenced in this number that you say, right? 100. What is it? How many?
100,000 pounds.
100,000. I suspected you said that, but I wanted to make it completely sure, right? Like 100,000 pounds of cannabis left over, right, is a very clear indicator of the fact that it takes a lot more to sell the cannabis than one would think, right? There's a lot of intermediate steps, right? Are there specific things that you see that the Jersey market did wrong there when it comes to facilitating the sale of cannabis? Or do you think that these restrictions are useful to ensure that all the cannabis sold is safe and is sold legally, safely, etc., right? And as a follow-up, does the surplus translate into an influx into the illicit markets?
Javier, I think you touched on some things that are near and dear to our heart at the association. First, I like how you mentioned the access to capital. Not that we did anything wrong, but I think when we created the industry, the CRC created tiers or prioritization for licenses. You would think, gee, that's a great idea. If you were formerly incarcerated, you're at the top of the list for priorities. If you come from an economically disadvantaged area, that's something that should make you a priority. Minority woman, disabled veteran, puts you as a top priority. But access to capital, I could be at the top of the list of priorities, but unless I have capital and I'm able to begin this business venture, then I'm number one without a bullet, right? I have no way of maintaining my top of the charts status. So that's I love how you mentioned access to capital. Another area that we touched on is this notion of having 100,000 pounds. Working with the medical community, I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard not so much the complaint that the product wasn't there, but it was quantity in terms of a specific strain, and then quality once I got it. So quantity and quality, just like any other industry, right? Any other consumable industry, that's important, that you have quality and quantity. How you determine that with 100,000 pounds, I don't know, but it's just part of how you get started. And I'll kind of leave it with this, not meaning to be flip when responding to other questions that I've gotten from other journalists about New Jersey, but the notion you've got to start somewhere, right? How do you just can't say we wish there was a market, right? It's got to start somewhere.